Hey guys, welcome to the channel. It's me, Colin, Project Constitution. Joining me today, I have a great show. We are going to interview Brian Starbuck, who goes by at HolonCitizen on
Mhm.
X. I think you have a YouTube channel as well, don't you?
Yes. Yes. HolonCitizen.
Also HolonCitizen. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, YouTuber X at HolonCitizen. You go check him out. Um, he is done a lot of great work on this case. Anybody familiar with me is probably aware of him already because I've shared a lot of his work on my channel. So we're going to get into one aspect of what he did today, which I think is important, especially since the preliminary hearing is coming up soon. And also, he has wrote a bill that we're trying to get passed, the Charlie Kirk Forced Disclosure Act,
Mhm.
which is basically going to force them to give us everything they have on the Charlie Kirk case.
Mhm.
So I want to make you guys aware of that as well, and go over that with you a little bit today. And that's basically what we're going to do on this show. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you, Brian, for coming on and talking with us.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Thanks,
Without further
Colin.
ado, yeah, let's get
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah. Oh, very good. So, what I with this, what I found is, and I did a lot of analysis of the JFK thing. They worked very hard to keep it on the state level as far as the trial. They worked very hard on keeping the single perpetrator. If you get more than one perpetrator, then you get a conspiracy, and then that very quickly starts to bump it up to the federal level. So if you want to, if quote unquote, if a cover up would happen, they would want to very much keep it at a state level and single perpetrator. And that's really critical for that process. And they did the same thing in the JFK thing. What happens here is
And
there.
real quick,
Mhm.
what what gets what I think you're 100% correct on that. And like we were talking off air a second ago,
Mhm.
I think that's also the reason why Cash Patel has been hiding and not and even the state as well, because the state has the same information. They had the information
Mhm.
about the co-conspirators that were like online
Mhm.
when had foreknowledge of the event. The ones that were saying that Charlie Kirk's going to get killed on the 10th before it ever even happened.
Mhm.
And like the people that wrote the book, about Charlie Kirk being killed or whatever. So they are intentionally withholding evidence for that very reason. They do not want it to be bumped up to the federal level. They want to keep it in the state court, which is
Mhm.
another red flag, which tells us that that this is a massive cover up, a massive government
Mhm.
or operation. Another thing,
Mhm.
just conspiracy, just like Charlie or just like JFK.
Yes.
So yeah, I just wanted to make that distinction as well.
Yeah, and so the thing that I tried to, when I was diving in October last year, and of all the stuff going in the legal process, is what I found is there's almost three different kind of boxed jurisdictions. There's local, there's federal law enforcement, and then there's U.S. intelligence. And what happens is if the government does not handle over all evidence in the trial to defense, then it's a crime. However, what happens is the prosecutor has to, and the partition that the trial is occurring in has to. So this case, that's why it's important to have the local trial than the local law enforcement. So you can think of if the FBI kind of blocked law enforcement in the beginning, they said don't interview them. Then they come along and talk to everybody, and it goes off to
That's
federal.
right.
Mhm.
Because if you remember at the like you said, in the very beginning, the FBI very much took control of the scene very fast. And they
Yes.
intentionally, we hear on the police audio where they said, well, you can even hear on the police audio where they said,
Yeah.
instructed the police, do not interview these witnesses.
Yes.
Just hold them until we get there, and the FBI will interview them. They
Mhm.
specifically instructed uh, the local police to stand down and not to talk to the witnesses.
Yeah, so you can almost imagine the FBI has a storage of all this evidence, some digital whatever, but basically they put it all there. And when you think of the storage on local law enforcement, it's nearly empty. then when the local law enforcement has to hand that over to defense, it's nearly nothing. And so that's what happens there. And so what happens with defense is the local prosecution, in this case local, and then local law enforcement has to hand it over, otherwise a crime. But what happens is if defense goes out of their way to go make a long request that goes off to the federal level, it drags in that partition, and then now the federal is under the legal gun, under a crime if they don't hand it all over. But when I looked at that list that defense handed to the court, I looked through it and it was all, nearly all to local law enforcement. And so I'm like, wow, that reinforces it. And so one of the critical ones is the FBI, when they do their investigation, they fill out 302 forms. And it's not just on witness interviews, but it's a whole bunch of other parts of the investigation. So the standard thing in all these trials do is they request the FBI 302 forms. That's pretty 101 kind of a thing. And then I looked in that list of defenses list of requests, and it was all missing. They very much scoped it down to quote unquote witness statements. But again, think of that going to local law enforcement. So when local law enforcement was blocked, and then whatever the few they did, then suddenly they hand over this almost as nearly empty set and go, oh, there you go. And so that was my big thing. So what happened here was that snowballed me to think of how can we use a crowbar to break this open. And so my November, December was to basically make a laundry list of everything defense should have put in there. And it grew to 208 categories. And what I found was there's this thing legally called an amicus brief. And so somebody can go off and take an amicus brief, hand it over to the court, even when you're not defense and when you're not prosecution. And in this case, I made my list to be eventually 208 different areas that really were the hard stuff that we were finding. And basically, the judge could have the power to say, we approve this, even when the defense says, I don't even want it, and the prosecution says, I don't want it. The defense, the judge can say, in the name of justice, it makes sense that this stuff is being requested to be added to forced discovery, and he approves it, and then suddenly it all gets pulled in. So even, quote unquote, if a cover-up was happening, let's say that the defense is not doing this, but for some reason they, theoretically, if some other defense was doing that kind of thing, they didn't request it. This amicus brief shoots past them and the judge can approve it. I found that, and I think that they picked Utah for a reason. Utah is one of the few states that does not allow amicus brief. So what I chose to do is then roll that over.
That's actually very interesting.
Yes. And so I went over here. So over here is kind of my thing of, I think a local law enforcement is these two partitions. Local law enforcement, I kind of joke around, kind of an older lady, but basically they have their very little evidence compared to the FBI. It all got collected up to the FBI, that there's very little to hand over. And so creating that amicus brief and put a whole long list of powerful stuff I just was all completely missing, was missing in discovery. Then if we kind of force that to happen, then I went off and created the amicus brief legal document myself over there in December. I started to talk to attorneys and I found that was not the case. Here it goes through the partition isolation. And on a legal basis, attorneys will recognize this as custodial agencies or sovereigns. And then up here, the defense, where the prosecution team is, ends up being the one that's required by default. And then these two are locked out unless the additional discovery happens over here. And so, there's the FBI 302 reforms. And over here shows just a long list of other trials where requesting the 302 forms is like obvious 101 thing to do. So what happens here is when I found that the amicus brief was blocked in Utah specifically, I decided, well, why don't I roll that amicus brief off into a bill to be passed into law? And I actually made them into 4. So that way, basically, some could pass earlier, some could pass later, some could pass earlier, be earlier to pass, easier to pass, some harder. And so the first one, the FBI one here, requires that all law enforcement plus DOJ, this will include everything in law enforcement, ATF and just everything else, that it requires that they basically hand it over. Now, the powerful thing here is not just what's in the trial, which normally is the court stuff, but it expands it to be everything about the investigation, even everything peripheral that's beyond what they would have to hand over discovery. And then it goes beyond that my law can now specifies that private companies, private individuals, think TPUSA, think about the Duncan Air Aviation, where the rental cars allegedly came out of. So it can sit there and go after a lot of private companies and private individuals to be forced to hand over information. So if whether TPUSA or some other place possibly had any possible financial irregularities, it could output that as any kind of motivation or just kind of anything peripheral to the case. So these laws would then bring all that stuff out, which discovery can't even do itself.
Yeah, and I think that would be a great asset, both for the investigation itself and also for us, because the public has been one of the best resources when it comes to actually uncovering evidence and solving the case. So the things like even just disclosing that information could help lead to further discoveries down the road that could also help the case and potentially get Tyler Robinson off, as well as implicate others that may be involved in the case, such as TPUSA or another foreign state or whatever,
Yes. And so what I found is I've been also analyzing, could appeals work to really both get Tyler Robinson out, but also kind of prove bigger actors behind this. And so what I kind of analyzed all that stuff is there's basically, I think it's almost impossible to pull off an appeal, except this also kind of runs around that. If the laws pass, then we can basically output proof that we can otherwise never get. Then what ends up happening is we can then get an appeal that would make it work, where otherwise appeals would be denied. So it's very, very powerful there also. So what I did here is amazing people.
Now, how would that part work where you say that it would generate a method for an appeal or a way to do an appeal?
Yeah, one of so really I think they'll always try the appeal, but the thing is normally it'll short circuit to being rejected. And so to make it succeed is the question, what's key to unlock that? And the effectively to unlock new evidence, new things of significance, and so maybe things that the government did not disclose. So there's a lot that the appeal court can reject, but when you start to get to let's say one thing I'm really tracking to kind of get smoking gun is when you look at that plane N1098L, the one that is kind of designed to drop drones. And that one flew, and it took off next to Fort Huachuca, went up to the Canadian border, went way out of its way to go by UVU, and the timing all aligned. They dropped down, dropped the airspeed to near stall speed. So what happens there is, if this investigation, these laws could force disclosure that there's some kind of linkage, I'm not saying there is, but if it ended up outing some linkage, what happened is, because those were resourced and allocated to happen ahead of time, taking off at about 8 a.m. in the morning, then what happens there, or even earlier, then what happens is somebody, often higher up, approved the plane being used and then the crew. And so suddenly when you get to the appellate level, when you can sit there and say, hey, the government was withholding, and this is whole new arena, we justify a new trial because this is beyond the capabilities of local defense, and the government was actively withholding. In that case, you can pretty much in my opinion, I think you can sit there and get an appeals trial approved at that point. It'll be hard to stop it with that level of kind of a smoking gun. I'm not saying that necessarily happened, that people necessarily knew ahead of time, but if these laws outed anything like that, where there's more than one perpetrator, the government may have known and not handed over, then suddenly I think those things swing open the door for an appeal.
Okay, yeah, I definitely see what you're saying, and
Mm-hmm.
you're right about that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first law, right? That's the first one that you're trying to
Yes.
pass.
Yes, exactly. And I'll give a little bit more peek at that. So what happens is, I'm not really a podcaster, so I don't get that much time online. But you guys are amazing, and I'm just such a fan of you and everybody else that spends a lot more time on this than I do. And I see that you guys make breakthroughs in kind of what I say what we have already. Basically, a bit of camera footage here and there, and people made a pretty great mileage out of that. I'm trying to really bust through a wall to get all this stuff in the government out, and we can go way beyond that. So what happens here is, well, you guys make all these breakthroughs. Then what I do is I want them to be available permanently, and that way, when people are searching on Gemini AI, ChatGPT, or DeepSeek Chinese version, it can pull up your guys' breakthroughs 5 years from now, or somebody that doesn't think about the Charlie Kirk thing. Maybe it's a legal student, maybe a student in high school. They ask a question about something peripheral, and then suddenly, hey, Charlie Kirk's an illustration of that, and give inconvenient facts of the government that comes, all this great truth comes out. So I basically created a site to go put that stuff up there, and I put the laws under there. So I put the fixed laws. This is made to be public, so everybody can go read those laws, and then you can. So the laws here available. This is the law number 1. And you can go read through there. And then it has the list. So it has them by sections. I'll get this zoomed in here. So if it has, like, for example, the FBI side, the 302 reports, and there's a whole bunch of things in here. Then when it comes to cell phone data, you can, when all over that day, all over town, rental cars were moving around, flights came in that were very important. So it basically has the entire town mapped out. Even when they're off their phone, it has where everybody is, who's together, where they went from part of town to the other part of town, who they met up with. And this stuff is really powerful in other trials, and we can get all this information also.
And that's actually important too, because if you remember, there were, I think it was 12. It might have been 12, or it could have been 14. I forget if it was 12 or 14, but there were, I think, like 12 Israeli cell phones, or 12 cell phones that were registered in Israel, had Israel SIM card. Someone walked into a store in Israel and set those phones up. And they were on site, on location at UVU that day. And on top of that, another discovery that we were able to make is when Israel, the United States, and Iran all went to that hotel in Pakistan to, do their first, peace negotiation or ceasefire, whatever it was. Those exact same cell phones, those same Israeli cell phones, also ping there as well. Yes. So that would help kind of flush out who those people are as well.
Absolutely. And so that the 12 that were on campus, then the subset that went over to the Sienna Hotel in Istanbul, the one you're talking about, and that was a very secured place in the red zone for the negotiations. So very much kind of intelligence type people would get in, and because it was the so very sensitive place. And then another intelligence commentator online mentioned that even if both sides were burner phones, the way the tracking is that they have ways to go link them to people in ways, because of the way they move and commonly visit and do a whole bunch of other stuff, that they can pretty much find the real world identity, even if both sides were burner phones. And this stuff is
Absolutely.
that crowbar to get it all out.
And another thing is, and even if we can't find out specifically who those people are, what we know, especially because of the them pinging at that hotel in Pakistan, we know that it has to be somebody within the government, either on the intelligence side or military side or whatever, either from Israel or the United States, which tells me that at the very least, that means that there were either military or intelligence assets that were on the ground at UVU the day that Charlie Kirk was killed.
Yes, and if you look over here at the airport very closest to the UVU, where these foreign registered planes that by all indicators appear, the tail registration indicates a government, not a private plane, and then they were also bouncing through U.S. Military airports, so it's really the intelligence. And then when they
those
got
planes regularly fly to Israel, by the way, those Egyptian planes, they regularly fly to Israel, and they try to hide the fact that they fly to Israel because they turn the transponder off before they do.
Exactly, and having that kind of Egyptian shell company to go kind of almost kind of point to Israel to kind of Egypt is almost the front company to take the blame and so on. So, and when they kind of came through the airport in UVU, they flashed security identification of intelligence, even foreign intelligence, to get past the security by a certain process here. So by me, basically, there's this part here by expediting clearance. There's this special clearance. So by me putting in very, very specific things in here on the protocol intelligence uses to bypass security, it makes it where the government has to out that. And now we get a chance to crack that at the UVU airport, and then also at all the military stops they make. And so by what happens is if they're trying to do the cover up and they succeed at covering up 80% of those airport locations, but we get 20% of them past any kind of possible cover up, it becomes we got the smoking gun, even if they're succeeding at getting 80% coverage. Does that make sense here?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So what happens here is, so when it comes to the exploding mic, when it comes to the AES factory that blew up, when it came through, here's a whole bunch of different areas. There's financial connections. There's pre-planning. There's just an autopsy. This will get the autopsy information out. There's a whole bunch of information here to go get these things out. Now, this is all text file. And so if everybody else kind of worries about this or that, is it they trust it? Do they, worry about this or that? You can copy paste it all into ChatGPT or anything else. And you can go ask it questions. Tell me if there's problems. Tell me, if this and that. And it can act as an attorney and almost sit there and see if you can trust it. I'm open for feedback. So right now I have an email address, HolonCitizen@gmail.com public. People, you can email me ideas. This is basically draft 1. It could be ready to pass into law, but also we want to go get feedback, and I'm all into improving, hardening anything that needs to be hardened. So I can go into the intelligence one, number 2, if you're ready for that.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So with this stuff, then as that isolated discovery, you got local law enforcement is 1, and then you got second is federal law enforcement is 2. The third one is in U.S. intelligence. So even if defense were able to force prosecution in the federal level to go force kind of hand over everything that they have, it does not require handover of the U.S. intelligence side. All those factual leads that Joe Kent was working hard to go sort of follow up on, and then got hard blocked by the White House. So
yeah, and that's important because he specifically, when I think it's Tucker Carlson he was on, but he said specifically that they did find evidence of a foreign nexus. He didn't specifically say Israel, but he said that there was evidence of a foreign nexus, and regardless of who it is, whether it's Israel or Egypt or China or whoever it may be, that's important, and it needs to be disclosed, and we need to know about it.
Yeah, totally. And this can sit there and make it where it has to go through, whatever collection systems they have on information that's related. And so if any foreign intelligence was actually interacting with TPUSA, I'm not saying they were, but say months prior, if there was any kind of trying to win over people, if they were ever in the offices, if they ever had meetings with anybody, if any of their planes flew to where a TPUSA event is, that whether Charlie Kirk or his wife,
or if any of the executives inside Turning Point USA, like Tyler Boyer, Andrew Colvett, Blake Neff, or not Blake Neff, but Erica Kirk, or if any of them just happen to be foreign intelligence assets.
Yeah, and let's say that they're not, but if this stuff uncloses that somebody's talking with maybe let's say not them, but anybody, if it comes in and uncovers things, that ends up being important there. And so that's the law number 2. The law number 4 becomes really, really powerful and interesting. What law number 1 is: hand over what you have, all of it, what you have. To think of the case management system and everything that they have, and then and that's ATF, FBI, DOJ, a whole bunch. And then law number 2 is the intelligence side, and that's what they have currently. So think of all if we have a week of UVU campus security footage, the 8K cameras that the TPUSA had, 8 feet in front of Charlie and behind him. And so we got all of it. That'd be very powerful. And then over here with the trusted investigation, this is the part where it can go forward and get new stuff that other things cannot. So here is a map of these laws, and these are the categories. So I talked about 100, 208. They're underneath these categories here: rental cars and any meetings. And so what happens here is the law specifies people that I've done research on that I think are absolute true blue Americans that know about this case and care, that I think are uncorruptible, that I think a lot of pressure could be applied to them, but they would not crack. We're talking about Tulsi Gabbard. We're talking about Joe Kent, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson. You're on this list. Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Ryan Mata's great. So with Thomas Massey, if Thomas Massey, leaves, he can end up doing this too. So what this does is it makes permission that employees, let's think about the FBI and then the U.S. intelligence, people could go raise their hand and go approach them and say, hey, we'd love to, that this person here and this person there would love to join Candace Owens' team, and someone else might join Dave Smith's team. And what happens is they would do investigation. They already have some level of security clearance. They might then this process would get them security cleared for anything else needed. And if they have to go operate in a SCIF, that can be provided. So you could think of almost, if Joe Kent ran one of these and Thomas Massey ran one of these, that they would, they may not have time to go off into a government building or a SCIF or anything like that, but they sit there and can go interview and find the ones that they trust. So some of them are like, someone's like, oh, I just reached retirement, but I want to stay on an extra year and go work on this. And they go with that. If 40 people approach Candace might come along and say, these half I don't trust, these half I do. So she's inviting in the ones that she knows are trustworthy, the Joe Kent types. And then she might get a group there on the FBI and a group there on the CIA. What ends up happening is when they're quote unquote assigned to this, they lose chain of command. They're no longer primarily responsible to somebody else. They're transferred to this almost like a division, and they no longer have to be controlled by upper management. And now then they get security clearance to go after everything they need to. And if it needs to stay within a SCIF, fine. It can stay within there while they're doing the investigation, and the team can work together. So they could go fly to Fort Huachuca, and they can have the permission that forces them to talk and under testimony, under kind of perjury, threat of perjury if they lie, and can go talk to people that were there where a possible Fort Huachuca meeting happened, and out who was there in the logs that got in the security camera there, footage or whatever. They can sit there and out anybody that was in these meetings and get the exact list of people. And they have now the power of law to force this information out. And then if they have to bring it back and...
So it basically gives us a mechanism to, kind of work within the government, within like the FBI or the CIA or military intelligence or whatever. It gives us that mechanism to work within the government and people that will work back with us and kind of do a acted special investigation, or in a special investigation capacity.
Yes.
Kind of like a special prosecutor would, if they appointed a special prosecutor for something Congress was investigating or whatever. This would be something along those lines.
Absolutely.
To where we could go in and get the information we need, ask for the information we need, and we would not have to go through a normal chain of command to get that information, and all that crap.
Exactly. And then while they're working on it, it can stay classified. So that way, security information can stay secure. But what ends up happening is when they then they kind of have a weekly meeting or whatever with Candace Owens, or you with your team, or, Tulsi Gabbard with a team assigned to her, then what happens is then they can say, hey, we're finding these categories, and it gives permission to get it out to public, let's say every 6 months, that you basically get kind of a dump of. And so what happens there is the stuff how it got collected by assets or methods, the stuff that can't come out and shouldn't come out, then that stuff doesn't come out. But the resulting, who were foreign intelligence people on UVU campus and their names, whether there's a SAM plane, who was on it, if the SAM plane was flying on this date or that date related to this thing over the Tennessee explosion, who was on the exact people on that plane when that's low-flying plane.
Yeah, because right now we can't even get that. Candace is denied when she tried to ask just who the flight itinerary, like who was on this plane. They won't even give her that. Something as simple as that, like who were the people that were on the plane, who was the manifest. They refused to give the passenger manifest.
This is basically a FOIA, a hot knife that cuts through any blockages to FOIA. And there's no chain of command that can stop it. What happens here is the DOJ can't stop it. These don't report up to a DOJ. Nobody can stop it, and things like this. No White House escalation meeting can stop it. It becomes unstoppable, and it has the secure process to make sure that no assets or methods of collection can come out. But the final results of these foreign people were, coming through security with Intel bypass security process on the UVU campus or anything else. We can sit there and get all that stuff completely exposed. And then once we have it where we know the names of who attended these meetings and came off the planes, then citizen investigators can go make a lot of progress on our side, because we now have the kind of keys on government side coming out. And then we now we almost have like 2% of information from a couple of student cell phone cameras today. And we got a lot of mileage out of that, but that's 2% of everything. When we come along and the golden keys out for the most important 40%, then citizen investigators can go investigate from there. And we pretty much have everything to really bust down all walls. Yeah, are you liking this? Oh, you're muted, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. This is honestly, this is going to become very useful and very important if we want to get actual transparency for what happened that day.
Yeah. And so over here is law number 4. And I have it. It's all launched today. Everybody can go sit there and take it to ChatGPT and ask questions on there. And it defines how the plumbing works. It's made to be very readable. Think non-legalese. The legalese parts are going to required go to the very end of the law. So they're there to be. It's all written to be a formal law. And then the top is very, very readable. And then it also includes all those sections, so we can, they can pretty much kind of do future investigations into TPUSA and Fort Huachuca and all these other places. So here's some other great things here. In practice, it's likely to have, and so it might be, if let's say half this list, if they're able to kind of get people, sabotage people or gaslight people on the government side on half of these. But the other thing is, the other half might be able to cherry pick and weed out the ones who are gaslighting or problematic and keep a true blue, honest set. Then it's a matter of if any one of these gets blocked, they'd have to try to block every single one of these, and each one of these gets their own investigation team. So it becomes nearly impossible to go kind of block. They can each get their teams there, and that includes the NSA, that includes the CIA. So basically, if they're able to cover up some, but not all, maybe there's DIA with military intelligence. They can, so it can sit there and have people working on all different fronts. So if somebody's retired and said, I already got my 30 years, I already got it all my retirement's all checked. I retire yesterday. Why don't I stay a year and go do this? Then it's like they're doing the right thing for the country, and they don't have to really worry about any forward-looking career. They're pretty much in retirement already. It can be a very, very powerful thing. And then if they do obstruction, and what I did here is I took the best out of the Epstein laws, and the JFK laws had very similar ones that the government's still ignoring. But basically, if anybody is obstructing, it's now 15 years prison sentence. So if they go to Fort Huachuca to go on to go interview people, and somebody obstructs, low level or high level, 15-year prison sentence. If they can't get the gates of who attended, who got through the gate, security camera footage, if anybody is blocking anything, it's 15-year prison sentence for anybody who's stopping it.
Yeah, I think that's important. And honestly, I never really got how they can, if it's a law, it's law. Same thing with Epstein. Like, we passed a disclosure law, but yet the government is still ignoring it. They're like with the redactions. It was supposed to be no redactions except for victims' names, and yet they redacted way more than that. They redacted even the people that were that were alleged co-conspirators. And they still haven't released everything that was supposed that they were, that the law forced them to release. And that's the part that bothers me. I don't get how they can even do that.
Yep.
I mean, it's illegal. So there definitely needs to be mechanisms to people that are obstructing. I agree.
Yeah, in that case, the DOJ head or the person right below them they appoint to run the Epstein disclosure, that when they basically ignore the law and block it anyway, this is designed to short circuit that. So it's not, there's no management chain of control that allows that to be blocked in any case. So it's, that's the point.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. And so what happens here is there's a lot of financial hard leads. I basically found ones that look like very interesting leads that were reasons people brought up, and that we can sit there and force out all this information. There is anybody has information about chain of custody, if kind of anybody today that was kind of told to kind of keep quiet. So for example, there were reports that people record video on campus. By the time they got home, something came over remotely, and intelligence services have this ability to go delete video footage, and say those students report that to the FBI. This can go out, get that outed, and then also the U.S. intelligence side can be used to go out. Hey, it did happen, and they can prove it happened. So U.S. intelligence provides a lot of their capabilities to the Five Eyes plus Israel. And one online intelligence former member that said that they hand off 99% over to Israel. And so if we can come sit there and find out that those tools were used, it shows possible which country and which tools, and that hard cover-ups were happening. And so suddenly we got conspiracy. Suddenly we can go pop it to a federal trial. There's a whole bunch of basically bust down walls that we just cannot do today.
And that's important to get it to a federal trial. And you're right, because there were several witnesses, like you said, there were several witnesses that said that they took video or they took pictures, and those videos or pictures were gone. They were zapped out of their phone, deleted out of their phone without any knowledge. And there's other ones that even reported that they were harassed by the FBI afterwards. Like, they released something on social media, and then they were harassed by the FBI and tried to coerce them to take it down and to delete it from their phones forever. And that goes to proving the conspiracy, which is so important.
Yes. And So this whole process kind of helps with all that. And the autopsy, there's the Utah law. So for example, the people who went off and passed that special law, the part that I found the time, like from my investigation, it looks like the initial planning window was October, November, December 2024. And then this law seemed to be written at that same time and then got proposed early January. It shot through at amazing speed. The law should have taken place January 1st, 2026 after the assassination, but they made it take place immediately. What happens is with the intelligence side, if they found out anybody involved with that law passing had any connection to foreign intelligence, meetings, communication, anything, it can sit there output very important things. Like who demanded not just that the pavers came in under the tent, but more importantly, the papers showed up 48 hours afterwards, but some mysterious team came in and took away the top 6 inches of soil. And so they didn't even trust the pavers, even though they're coming in within 48 hours. They didn't even trust them. Some other mysterious team came in and took away earth, a 6-inch layer of earth, hauled away. And so suddenly, if we can sit there and basically, the cell phone gets all vacuumed up by U.S. intelligence. And then we sit there and find out everybody who came through with their cell phone on their hip. It can sit there and map out everybody in which part of campus they were on and which minute they were here or there. And we can sit there and track down who those people hauled away the 6-inch dirt, and also where'd they go? Where'd they take the dirt?
Exactly. That's very important. That we need to know who did it, and we need to know who instructed them to do it, and we need to know where that stuff is. Did they preserve it? And if not, why? But if they preserved it, then where is it? Because we need to see that. The defense needs to try to get a hold of that evidence. When we talk about discovery, that's another thing that the defense needs to ask for in discovery, is they need to get access to that 6 inches of dirt that they removed, so that they can scan it and have tests for explosives residue.
Yeah. Exactly. And then also, what office do they work out of? What part of the government do they work for? Who's the hands-on people driving trucks? Who's the chain of command up that they're communicating with and authorizing it? So it really peels back organizations, low level in the chain of command and all the way up to the level of the chain of command. And by having between cell phone and communication and everything else, U.S. intelligence can sit there and peel all these things away, and there's no chain of command. They can go stop this investigation here. So that's basically, this is, the Hamptons meeting. I'll just kind of point out some stuff. The rental cars. There's a whole bunch of stuff all around Fort Huachuca. There's a explosives company there, foreign owned. There's a certain number of things also going on there. DOJ contract, who authorized that. There's the things where I think the AES factory, the question mark is, did they come along and have people sign NDAs, maybe your family, with payouts, and they're now legally locked up by NDAs? This is the hot knife that goes past NDAs. The law can sit there and say, this supersets and NDAs are now off. Not only are they allowed to talk, but also when they're interviewed, they're required to talk under threat of obstruction of justice. So the any payments, there's Tyler Robinson's his partner, his parents were buying new houses. I'm not saying they did anything wrong, but if there's any financial money moving around, it can sit there and come out. If they had any connections with powerful people, or anybody related had connections to powerful people, let's say it didn't happen, but if it did, that's interesting. And if U.S. intelligence was contacting anybody,
Bill Aikman, by the way, was one of the people that upped it from $100,000 to $1 million for the reward money. And there's questions whether the reward money went to Tyler Robinson's father or whether it actually went to Lance Twiggs for being the one that actually gave the information, that provided the information against him. And that would be very, very concerning because there's a lot of us that think Lance Twiggs may have been the one that set Tyler Robinson up.
Yes.
And if that is the case, then now we have a direct connection between, obviously, Aikman is very connected to Israel, and Netanyahu. So now we have a direct connection between Aikman and Lance Twiggs, or Israel and Lance Twiggs. So, it was that payment for potentially, doing what they, instructed him to do.
Yeah, and right now, let's say that nobody did anything wrong, but if we come back and this investigation comes, this person had communication here, or a threat there, or payment here, or money came from where, and it ended up in funding ended up there. Suddenly, we're outing people or things that are interesting. So right now, I don't want to accuse anybody, but if it comes out at the end of the day, it points to names and actions and dates and who's connected to who. It's all very powerful stuff. So there's a lot of surprising power here. So I theorize when the reason Charlie Kirk said, they are going to kill me tomorrow. At the very end, he basically started to say, they are going to kill me tomorrow. The question is, was there a phone call, a communication, let's specifically say a phone call, where they basically said, hey, it's really, they say plata or pluma is take the silver or get the bullet of lead. It's a better basically capitulate and get some benefits. Otherwise, you're dead. That's kind of the whole kind of drug cartel thing in Mexico. But what happens here is if they came back and said, we give you some benefit or you're dead. If they came along on that day before, they basically said, this offer is gone tonight. This is your last time. Window's closing. Take it. And he end up saying no. What happened, and that's why he came up saying they're going to kill me tomorrow, because he basically knew when they said he cannot come back with a yes tomorrow on that offer, he knew that that's because he'd be dead the next day. That's just a theory. And then what happens here is, did he get a phone call? Did somebody offer him stock in something that may well have been turned him into a billionaire as the company grew? Was there a phone call about that? Who was it? What company? What happened in that phone call? Now that with all the surveillance, the Edward Snowden type, then they might have phone calls of this we can get out of U.S. intelligence. And if we sit there and he was literally threatened, you suddenly have more people into a guaranteed conspiracy, and it's suddenly now a conspiracy case.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah. Definitely. I want to address this comment real quick. This person says the dirt most likely went to USPCI, which is 10 miles east of Wendover, less than an hour drive from UVU. They keep meticulous records there. Yeah. Thank you for that tip. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm definitely going to look into it and research it after this and contact them and see if that might be the case. But if we could find out where that dirt is or where it went, that would be definitely be important. So thank you, whoever sent that comment. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think there's heroes across government, military, law enforcement, and intelligence everywhere. And so if certain people kind of knew, and certain people are kind of keeping quiet on this, there's people that know, and they're often locked down. What ends up happening is if we come back over here to this, and let's say you have a team signed to you, and you got eight in the FBI and 9 in U.S. intelligence, some FBI, some NSA. And then what happens there is each one of those might well act like a Candace Owen. Suddenly they might get a paper dropped off, and then so they might get an email laundered through something that washes identity and says, "Hey, XYZ." They're basically they can go dump off all the secrets to somebody they trust in-house, and then suddenly these people are the Candace Owens types, have million inbound leads, and then they sit there and start to go investigate people and go kind of claw things open from there. So the great thing then is they basically become a WikiLeaks kind of a person to go shoot their stuff through, and then say, hey, go look at this classified system, do this query, and especially this date range. Okay, then suddenly it's a U.S. intelligence person talking to a U.S. intelligence person, and they're not really leaking anything classified. And then so suddenly now this U.S. intelligence person goes off and queries their system. Now they have elevated access to be able to do that. And then boom, they got the mother lode, and then they wiped out any sources and methods and assets connected to that. And they can release the information that's factual and important for the investigation, yet not kind of compromising anything that's classified.
Yeah, absolutely. And these whistleblowers are important. Another whistleblower that we got was the guy that, because besides the Axel 10 plane that that released the drones and whatever flew over UBU at stall speed. Besides that one, there was another plane, another surveillance spy plane that was flying over flying over UBU that day, taking aerial photographs of everything. And they made 4 passes back and forth in a line. And we would not have known about, I forget the name of the company off the top of my head, but we would not have known about that if a whistleblower from I guess either from the government or somebody who works for that company had not released the actual images taken from that plane during the event of Charlie Kirk, or of the tent there and everything, on TikTok. We would not have known that had it not been for them.
Yes, and here's a list of planes, and the one you're talking about is definitely included inside of here. I forget which, what tail number it is and all that, but that's a private. In that case, it was a private company, and what happens is they basically were buggered out 2 minutes before it happened, and so that way, so when they're built for basically collections, electronic and video, and so let's say that they're not doing anything wrong or illegal or anything, or had no pre-knowledge, but if somebody hires something similar to them and they're basically doing video and streaming off to somebody to watch it remotely to effectively scan the place to make sure everything's lined up and no problems are coming.
We need to report. I'm not saying the company itself did anything wrong, but we need to know who their client is. I want to know who hired them to do that, because that's not coincidence. There's no way that's a coincidence that plane just happened to be commissioned to fly over UBU and take those aerial photographs at the exact time that the Charlie Kirk event was going on.
Yeah, and I made that comment just to make sure that we get no defamation problems. The one thing here is, yes, you're right. Like they may not, there've been, peers of Driven Snow knew nothing, but some client paid them. Where the money come from? And also, basically, if they're streaming video, well, we want to chase down who is receiving that video, what room full of people are watching its operations, what's the chain of command that wrote checks and authorized that people to be allocated that way. So we can basically go in every single direction and peel back things. And we can start with here in the private companies and start to go claw back things there. And then we might find breakthroughs, kind of start make the first half through the tunnel that way, and then we can start keep pulling the thread all the way back in through government and through that aspect, foreign and domestic. Yeah, so that's this, and everybody can look at the laws. So what I'm looking for is really, it's a matter of speak up. Thomas Massie, we were lucky that one guy kind of ran the whole thing himself. In this case, I wish Thomas Massie, now he's going to stay in, he's still in Congress for another 6 months until the end of the year. He has another 5-6 months left or so. So I wish he would sponsor this. There's several other great people, Boebert and some other people in Congress. I think everybody on Twitter, everybody on YouTube, anything, ask them to go sponsor the bill. I've sent letter to a number of Congress people. You guys should too. Call them. And what happens is, just like the Epstein laws kind of behave this way. They voted it down. They voted it down. They voted it down. Finally, they had to pass it. What I really view this is, and I call the Epstein stuff as boomerang for the bad guys. They try to throw it away and cover it up, but it comes around sooner or later and whacks them in the head. And they try to cover it up and throw it away and all that stuff. And eventually, the Epstein law is passed. So what happens here is this law now becomes a test of really, I kind of worry that a lot of Congress is sold out to whether foreign interests or whatever it is, people behind the
without a doubt. Absolutely, without a doubt.
And then what happens here is the people who vote no on this, we should primary them all out. And if we keep primarying them out, and then basically in the elections, it should be a matter: are you going to pass this law or not? The ones that say no, I'm not going to pass a law, and the ones that say yes, we vote for the ones that say yes. And then when we get people in there, this law may not pass now, but we have a crack after the next two, the midterms coming up, and every 2 years we have a crack at getting these laws passed. And if just as one of these laws pass, we might get a whole bunch of information out, and then it becomes unstoppable for them to pass the rest of the laws. So
precisely. Yeah, it's like I said, it's very important, and everybody definitely share this. Tag Thomas Massey, tag whatever your congressman is. Let's see if we can get this bill sponsored and get it on the floor for a vote.
Yeah. Very great. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have. And I'm always listening. I would have it like people have discussions back and forth. So people go post to you, and I love this. I don't like that. What about this? Can we break for the investigation on that? I love if we can have X light up, us talking to each other on how do we bust through walls until we all have video footage from UVU, the FBI 302 forms. We pretty much get everything in our hands, and suddenly we can just advance miles.
Yeah, I agree. Because that some of the best things that come out are when we all collaborate together on something, and we whittle down what's important, what's not important. How to advance something in the best way possible. So absolutely, definitely let's talk about it. Let's get the discussion going. I hope other creators will pick up on this and start talking about it. Definitely in the comments, get the discussion going. What you like about it, what you don't like about it, things that might need to change, things you want to see. Like, let's get the discussion going. I think it'll be very, very helpful for us. And like I said, definitely at the very least, share this out and make sure you are tagging whatever your congressman is, especially Thomas Massey. Make sure you make sure you tag him, because he is, we know for a fact that he would get on board with this.
Yeah. So, and on my Twitter account, I have a number of videos going through different angles of this, and I cover a lot more. So I cover the discovery, the amicus brief, and other videos cover these laws. And so I have a whole bunch of different angles of this also. So that kind of content's available, including on YouTube.
Yeah, make sure you check out his YouTube and also his X feed. Again, he's at HolonCitizen, HOLEN Citizen. And definitely check out his videos and other posts. Because like he has some good videos, good slides and stuff going over other things about the case. Like I said, I've shared some of that on my channel as well. He's doing really good work. So he's somebody that we should support. Definitely follow him.
Yeah, and thanks. And even though kind of separate from us, it's just you can always get access to laws. It's interesting. Google hard censors whoassassinatedcharliekirk.com. There's two websites. Somebody else created whokilledck.com, and that's a different one. Mine is whoassassinatedcharliekirk.com, and I work on really all the breakthroughs you made and others. I work on documenting them for permanency, and then you can also get the laws here.
Yeah, definitely check out his website. Also, the whokilledck.com is another good one. And I want to know, do you know anything about you said Google hard censors them, and you're absolutely correct on that. Like if you type whokilledck.com or whatever into Google, it will not show up. The only way you can get to that site is if you actually type the URL in. Why does that happen? Is that intentional that they're doing that, or you think it's because of like some credibility thing with how Google does it? Like what do you think the reason is why it's being censored?
Yeah, I work in the tech industry, so I'm used to launching websites and using Google Search Console to get them formally registered, the robots.txt, and I do all the right technical things. And in Google Search Console, they tell you when you've done everything right to give them the data, and then they crawl it. And so I've had lots of websites fully get crawled and appear in Google search. So I'm very experienced at jumping through all the hoops. And when I go in Google Search Console, it only shows these two stubs, and it really kind of it basically is kind of turned off all my content on all the pages. And that basically, in the net effect of my tests, it kind of results in I'm basically censored on Google Search Console results. And so from the last time I checked, so it's interesting there that I verified I'm not doing anything wrong technically, and it's for all indications I've checked a million different ways, it seems like Google's making an intentional decision, however, algorithm or otherwise.
Yeah, that's what I think as well. And that's pretty concerning. You know, that tells me that we already kind of know that the administration has been in on the cover up as well, but that kind of also shows that, you know, is further proof of that, because, you know, Google's not just doing that on their own. They were instructed to do that by somebody, whether it be somebody in the Trump administration or somebody in the intelligence community, you know, in the intelligence agency. So there's a concerted effort to censor information, our information in particular, anything that's not the official FedSlop story, you know, from Google.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just from all my tests. I did lots and lots of tests, and that's just kind of the results I get from my tests that leads me to that logical conclusion. And not say it's censored, but the traffic is blocked and kind of not appearing in the search results. From what I've tried, it seems to not work. So yeah, that's what I have.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. Excellent information. And like I said, the law itself, I think we need to get this law passed. It's a great law, actually a couple laws, but the disclosure in general, the forced disclosure, we need to get passed.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you even for the information about the discovery process and everything, because like I said, the preliminary hearing is coming up all next week. And I think it's good for people to kind of know about that and the holes that the defense has in their case so far with the discovery. And yeah. So
I found one last thing. One thing that's very, very important. One last thing that's really important is, from what I've heard from attorneys and various things, people are saying that when they did provide discovery, the ATF claimed analysis or whatever, the autopsy, to defense, whatever the small list that they did provide, they think it's going to be hard blocked from anybody being able to get their hands on it ever. And the judge can also do a sealing to go seal up the stuff to make sure it gets visible by the public. Passing these laws overwrites that and forces the autopsy, and that includes the videos, to go police problems on that side, and everything handed over to discovery also gets in our hands, even overriding a court and a judge trying to do a sealing up of that evidence at the end. So it becomes powerful from that side also. Yeah.
Definitely. And that's why this is so important that we get this law passed. Absolutely. Yeah. So hopefully you guys realize now it's on your radar. Yeah, I definitely wanted to have them come on here and introduce the law to you guys, so you understand what we're talking about. And now that it's on the radar, hopefully you guys see how important it is, and that we advance this and get it on the floor for a vote and hopefully get it passed. So again, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure. And let's see where this goes. I'm excited.
Hopefully it works. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you guys, and see you guys on the next one.